Hi everyone. Today we're talking to emerging leader Alison Visser. Alison's an actuary specialising in defined benefit pension funds, and she's currently working at Mercer in Washington, DC. Alison's actuarial career started in life insurance in Sydney and included a stint as a lecturer at the Australian National University in Canberra. She's a Guardian Actuarial Leadership Program graduate, and today she draws on a wide range of experience for our discussion. Alison, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Julia. Thanks. I'm excited to be here.
So, Alison, you've lived and worked in a whole lot of different countries, completely different from my experience. I've grown up and only worked here in Australia. What can you tell us about some of the things you've learnt from that diverse experience of living and working in different countries?
I have lived in a few different places, and this latest move has been a little bit different in that I've moved to the US, and so everybody speaks my language, my native tongue, which has been different to my other moves, which makes things so much easier and so much more difficult in different ways. So, it's the common language that divides you, right? So, when you're in a different culture and you sound different and your language is different and you look different, then there's a lot of things that you're assumed not to know. So people know that there's like, they won't make assumptions about how you understand something, and they'll really take the time to explain it. And you, at the same time, you also don't make assumptions about them. Whereas when you're using the same language, I think there's a lot of stuff that kind of goes unsaid. Even just interacting with people on the phone, like Australians are just so happy, laid back, kind of as a whole culture, and so when you're speaking, when you call up to somebody in the banking, you're like, oh, hey, how's it going? And you talk about the day. When I do that here, all I get back is, how can I help you? How can I help you? How can I help you? And they're not being rude. It's like I'm wasting their time,
Right.
They're just efficient, and they're just trying to get on to the next thing. And it really kind of took me a while to get there. So whereas when I was living in other countries where I didn't speak the language, and culturally it was so different to what I was used to, then I was much more deliberate, I guess, about understanding cultural norms and understanding other people's preferences around communication and what was expected, rather than just making kind of they're almost like unconscious assumptions instead of unconscious bias. It's like this unconscious assumption of how things work, I guess.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So it almost sounds like the language is like a proxy for culture. So when you're still speaking your native language, you kind of don't think consciously about how different the culture is, because you think, oh, we all speak the same language. But when you're in a country where the language is different, you're thinking about everything about culture, because the language is sort of that indicator that I'm in a different place.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That's that's exactly how it feels. And then I think one of the things I've learned from living in different places and countries and different people, different relationships, is that at the end of the day, it all comes down to people. So we're all living our lives in different ways. And of course, there's large generalizations about how different cultures achieve things or behave. But really, we all wake up every day and we all just try and, get through that day, do the best. We all need to eat. We all need to sleep. Most cultures are just trying to finish in a better place than they started the day. And that's common across all cultures.
Yeah, I love that.
Everyone's just trying to do the best for their for their kids, for their generation, for their environment, you know?
Just trying to live their lives and get by and survive and have a good life as best they can.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
And that's it. People are doing that all over the world.
So even though we're different, we've still got that common denominator of just being human and trying to live our lives.
Yeah.
So for my own curiosity then, Alison, having never worked outside Australia myself, you said that when you're working in America, it's quite different, even though the language is still English, still speaking English, but the culture is quite different. Is there something that stood out or a situation that stood out that sort of made you think, wow, we're not in Australia anymore?
Not in Kansas anymore.
What's maybe one of the biggest differences that you've noticed in workplace culture?
I don't know if I can really answer that as an American specific thing, because now my work in America is in a post-COVID world, which is just a whole new thing for me, full stop.
That's
so
true.
It's hard to say what's post-COVID and what's, you know, American culture. I've definitely found that it's like, so Americans are the kind of people you want to meet face to face. They will talk, are so generous. And again, I'm generalizing, but communication.
The ones you've met.
So generous with their time and so interested in what you have to say when you're face to face with someone. But yeah, I really found everybody to really accommodating, very interested. And again, it's all of the same issues and all of the same, I don't know, communication styles and management styles seem to be in this office here as they were in just about any office I've been into.
Yeah,
so
amazing.
Again, it just comes down to people
Being very similar. We're all human, and even though we might sound different or have a different accent or a different language or some different cultural aspects, there's that common thread of humanness. So
absolutely. And it's all, and I think communication has just been so important in any of my roles and in any of my relationships, whether they be professional or personal. It's amazing how much of a difference choosing your words carefully and how a message is delivered can make. So not just the message, not just the content of the message, but how the message is delivered can make all of the difference. Whether that's in my professional life, when I'm trying to achieve something, in my personal life with my husband or my kids or my friends, language can make such a difference. And learning to learning to take ownership of your opinions, I guess. Like, so I think this or I feel that, rather than that kind of like, you do this and turning it into something that's accusatory. I mean, that is such a basic thing. And it has changed the way that I communicate and the way my words are received from people.
And it sounds like that's had an impact both at home and at work, that being able to sort of describe how you're feeling or the impact it's having on you has been important for lots of different scenarios, not just at work, but also at home.
Yeah. And I think anything if I learn it in my professional life, I apply it in my personal life and vice versa. Like it goes both ways. So if I learn something at home, I'm always trying it in the office, in my professional life, for sure. And the same the other way. So time management is something that I've recently been working on, and I was actually surprised to find out that it wasn't a strength of mine, because I've always achieved things, and I would have always put myself as a very good time manager. Whereas we can always improve, but one of the things that I've really learned is that being very deliberate about my time management has helped me. So prioritizing tasks and not just doing things, but being selective and deliberate in the way that I do things means that I'm actually getting more done.
So just actually being aware of how you're spending your time and the decisions that you're making around that, because it's quite easy to just get on autopilot, especially when things are busy, to just do the next thing, put out the next fire. Who's squeaking the loudest, what needs to be done next.
And just kind of run through your inbox, like trying to get reply to all of your emails. What's next? Whereas I'm finding that by taking half an hour every day when I come in, I have a list now, an ongoing list of all the things that I want to get done. And if something came up the previous day, I can put it on there. And I'm finding that really helpful in making sure that things that I've sent out, I can just check on that. And if I also, it's helped me to identify places where I can delegate or I can teach somebody. And that I found that really important too. Whereas sometimes if I'm really busy on something, I don't want to be the bottleneck in the middle of the workflow. And I don't. So so just taking that time to pause and see, okay, what's coming up? I might not be getting to it, but is there somebody else that maybe can start something?
And are you finding that having that time at the start of the day to kind of deliberately revisit what's actually on your list, that's giving you some space to make decisions about delegation?
Absolutely. So make decisions about delegation, make time for strategic things as well. I used to always look at people who, I don't know, contribute to intellectual capital at the company, or have read the latest things on the stock market. I think, how do they get time to do that? Whereas, I mean, we all have the same amount of time every day.
We do. Yep.
We do. Everyone's got the same amount of time. It's just how we choose to do it. And now I'm finding by choosing how we choose to spend that time, and now that I'm finding by choosing to spend half an hour really thinking about what's on my plate, what I want to achieve, what's coming up, what's still out there, who have I got that could help me, then it means that I'm really, I guess, growing, because I'm able to pass things off which somebody else can do. So that gives me much more of an opportunity to grow and to look for new things. And then this is the embarrassing part. I'm now doing the same thing with my husband.
How's that?
Well, he's been at me for years. I mean, we've been together for a long time. And he has always said, like, but you're busy. That doesn't mean you're busy doing the most important things. He I hate to say it, but he's been right the whole time. And so we've actually been talking about how we manage, this is a complete tangent now, but how we manage the mental load of being parents and all the invisible work that goes on when you're a parent. Because previously I've either worked part-time or I've been on maternity leave, and so I've taken the bulk of that mental load. And now that I'm working full-time, I think after the first month, he said to me, there seems to be a bunch of stuff going on that I'm not tracking. How can we change that?
Wow.
How can we? I know.
I know. A great conversation to be having.
I mean, I was just as shocked as you are, but
and remind me, Alison, so you've got 3 children. You and your husband have 3 children, and how old are your kids now?
9, 5, and the little guy's going to be 4 in less than a month. So we've got 3, and my husband and I were just babies when we got together. So we've been together since we were 20 years old. So that's like all of 10 years. A little bit longer.
You must have had kids straight away.
Yeah, we did.
To have
we
a
totally
9-year-old.
So we, so our relationship has changed over the years, completely compared to the kids we were at 20 to how we are now. So when he, so when we're now facing this challenge of having two parents in full-time paid work, and also managing the load of the kids. So now we have this, we're doing the same thing. We're looking at tasks of what needs to be done for the kids, and we see what's there, what needs to be prioritized, so that we're not just making sure that the kids have summer shoes, but we're also ringing up this person to get an appointment for speech or physio or something.
And no doubt two full-time working parents with 3 small children, I can't think of many situations that are going to require more advanced time management skills than the one that you're in right now.
Well, I have to say it's easier than it has been in the past, because we now consistently get 7 to 8 hours sleep a night. So
that helps. Sleep's important.
That does help. And that's funny, Julia, coming from you, is the whole time I've known you, you've been in the situation where I think when we first met and I first started working for you was the week that your youngest child was finishing kindergarten.
Right.
And I remember it distinctly, because it was such a big milestone that you'd been through it with your kids already, and now the last one was graduating.
It's quite amazing how things change and how you live through these busy periods of your life and come out the other end. I mean, we're at the point now where we've got 2 parents working full time, but we don't have any children at home. Our youngest has a license and a car and is quite independent. We've only got 1 child left at home out of the 4. So it's funny how things change. But I do remember quite clearly when we were at the stage that you and your husband are at with, the smaller children that just have so much day-to-day need, and it really is a time management challenge, and probably the hardest it's ever going to get. So it's downhill from here if you can survive this.
And it's those same skills, right? So at work, you can look at everything that needs to be done and think, okay, well, who's available to help me? It's the same at home. And I've seen you do that as well. It's like, okay, we all need to eat dinner. That's a task that's going to happen every day. There's
who's capable of doing it?
There's 5 of us living in the house, and we're all capable of doing different parts. So obviously we're not going to ask the 5-year-old to cook beef bourguignon or something fancy, but there's absolutely things that the 5-year-old can do, and that's right. The same in the workplace. Right, so we're not expecting our analysts to sign off on the financial reports, but we can still take them along. They don't need to know everything end to end, and they can learn little by little by little. So, it's the same principle.
It's a great analogy. Understanding what they can do rather than saying what they can't do, but to just think about which bits they can do and how you can develop your team members and how you can give them an opportunity to learn and grow, because we were all there at one point. We were all new in our careers at one point. It's easy to forget sometimes.
And letting them, it's okay. It's to let them try things and not know the answer. It's the same with our kids.
Important. It's important. And often that's the best way they can learn. If you can give them an opportunity to try something and figure things out for themselves. Most of us learn best by having a go and building our skills that way, rather than just waiting until we're ready, because when are we ever going to be ready?
We're not. And then sometimes when we try something and we can't figure it out, and we go to either our boss at work or someone who knows something more technically, or you know, if it's our kids, they come to us, witnessing how somebody approaches that problem and how they solve that problem is also really important.
That's a good point, because problem solving is an important part of what most of us do every day. I mean, whether we're solving the problem around good audio for a podcast, or whether we're solving a problem around building a new model for new capital standards. I mean, there's lots of different problems, and no matter how senior we are in our careers or where we're at, there's always going to be new problems to solve. So being able to solve problems is a skill in itself. And
watch how other people approach that.
Okay,
so I got, you know, I got 50% of the way. Oh, I see what you've done here.
Yep.
So next time, you know, you get 75% of the way. And you know, that comes with doing a new model or presenting to a client, creating slides, and it comes to trying to make sure that your 3-year-old gets his shoes and puts them on his feet when you want to leave the house before they turn 30, preferably.
That's right. That's right.
You know, little by little.
So, so really interesting. So there's a couple of things I want to pick up on there. So one is you were talking about communication, and, you know, how communication at work and at home is so important, and how being sort of intentional around that communication has been quite game-changing for you in lots of regards. So I want to talk a bit more about that, because I mean, actuaries sort of get a bad rap when it comes to communication. Like, why do you think that is? Why do you think that communication is something that we either, I mean, there's always a bit of truth in a stereotype, but that stereotype that we struggle to communicate as actuaries, why do you think that is?
I think it probably comes down to having a bit of self-awareness in the way our own communication preferences may be different to the communication preferences of the broader organization, or also just different disciplines. I think as actuaries, I know I personally am like this, was like this, and I'm always trying to work on it, is that I have been trained, but, you know, throughout my university career and then in my professional exams, that before I answer a question, I need to really lay out the steps that I took to get to the answer. So if I'm sitting exams and the exam is worth like 10 marks, I can't just say the answer is capital regulations. I need to really expand on all of the information that I know of how I got to that conclusion. So
that you get all the marks in the question.
So that I get all the marks in the question.
Yeah.
And then if we're making a model, we really we go from the data to the liability, right?
Yep.
So, you know, we start with our participants, and we you know, we do the extraction, when we build up our information, run it through, create our model, and then we finally get to the answer. So when somebody asks me a question, I will often go through that process of gathering information and considering different points before I actually get to the point. Right. So and that's communication preference for me, and maybe, you know, generalizing, maybe other actuaries as well, they have the same type of preference. They like to know all the detail. We live in a world where that's not true for everybody, and so maybe we have a bad rap because we communicate in ways which we like, rather than shifting our communication styles based on who our audience is and what's important to them.
Yeah,
So,
so
I
it's
mean,
almost like that exam process, or the way we've been taught to logically answer problems or work through challenges. That's sort of become ingrained in the way that we like to share our responses back to people, but not everyone
our
wants to hear the
results,
story. Not everyone wants
that
to come on that journey with us, even though
that's
that was our journey and we want to share it, or we've been
that's
conditioned
right.
to share it in an exam to
Yeah,
get all the marks.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Some people just want to know what the forest is called. They don't need to know like every single tree that you went through, you know,
yeah,
to build this picture of the forest at the end. So yeah, I think understanding your audience and their communication preferences is maybe something that as actuaries we've generally missed. And then there's a layer of groupthink in there as well, I think.
How do you mean?
Component of groupthink. Well, I mean, if we come up in an organization that has always communicated in one way, and that way is to present numbers to the 5 decimal points, and write reports that have detail, do presentations that, kind of PowerPoint presentations that look like a report in a presentation rather than
Yep.
an actual presentation. Then if we think, that's kind of what's expected, or that's how, that's how actuaries communicate at certain levels, then again, we practice that as a group. We tend to think that's what's accepted. And what if we put out something that was really light on numbers then compared to other actuaries? Do we look less robust? I don't know. I mean, again, that's going to depend who we're communicating to, and we need to be curious and ask them, why we've got a bad rap.
Yeah. So maybe it depends on the audience.
I think it does.
So you talked about communication preferences and understanding the communication preferences of the audience.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean by that? What are some ways that, what are some things that characterize different communication preferences that you've seen?
So some people really need to know the detail to be comfortable with something. And so Joe, my husband's like that. If I said, okay, hey, do you want to go to a brewery tomorrow? Okay, not enough information.
Right.
It needs to be like, okay, what time? What are we thinking? How far away is it? Is it just us? Are we bringing the kids? So he likes to know more detail in order to answer a question, or even just to be comfortable. I have another friend who I might just put brewery question mark and an emoji.
Yeah.
Because if I put in too much detail, I've lost them already.
Right.
So some people like detail in communication. Some people like the big picture. Some people like stories, analogies, anecdotes. Some people could prefer just to be much more factual. And I mean, I'm a big storyteller, and that's something that's really difficult for me, is recognizing that not everybody wants to hear my life story and all of my jokes when they ask me a question, or even just how are you?
Okay.
So, and when somebody is being direct and factual with me, then it's not a personal attack on either my life story or my jokes. Which I have
just a different preference.
Pretty good. Yeah,
they're excellent jokes.
Thank you. I knew you would understand. So it's, instead of kind of feeling off-put or even a little bit guarded or offensive, now I feel as if I just go, oh, okay, different communication style, switch.
So just that awareness that we have different styles, that some people want more or less information, detail, stories, jokes, And if you can understand that, you can deliver your message in a way that's going to, be most likely to hit the mark with that person based on their preference. Yeah.
Exactly. Because at the end of the day, what do I want out of the interaction is I want my message to land. And so what's more important, that I get to tell my jokes and do things the way that's more natural to me, or that I switch my delivery and make it more palatable, more easy to digest, more accessible for whoever it is I'm giving the message to.
Awesome. Yeah. That's such good advice. So, Alison, we've talked about a lot of things today. We've talked about the difference in culture and language when you're working in different countries, whether the language is the same or different, and how that can impact how you're engaging and interacting with others. We've talked a bit about communication and its importance both at work and at home, and how we can adapt our styles a little bit to make sure that our message is landing in the way that we need it to, based on having a better understanding of the communication preferences of the people that we're talking to. You've also talked about time management and the military precision that must be required to manage your household with 2 full-time working parents and 3 little kids. And you've also talked a bit about delegation and how, in being deliberate around your time management opens up some opportunities to delegate and to develop your team members, as well as to make better use of your time too. But to finish, I'd like to ask you one final question, which is this: what is one tip that you'd have for actuaries who are stepping into their first management role?
I have been thinking about this one, and I want to say, honestly, to enroll in your course, and I'm worried you're going to edit me out for that one.
Okay.
Because all of those things that I've talked about are covered in your in the Guardian Actuarial Leadership course, which I am, like you said, a graduate of. But not only am I a graduate of the course, I have been working with you, Julia, and learning from you for a number of years. And I feel like, having done the course, I can see how deliberate you are in the way that you go about things, and I have learned those skills. So I don't know if you picked up on a lot of the things I talked about is stuff that I learned from that course, the time management, the delegation, the communication styles. So that's my number one answer.
Well, they are core skills, which is why they're part of the course. They're important skills for new managers. So
thank you.
Appreciate the shout out.
That's my number one answer. But just in case you edit me out, I would also say that my tip is that we're all growing and we're all learning every day. And there's nothing that you can't change. So I read that growth mindset book. I actually read it for one of my kids who I saw was struggling with things, who had very fixed views of themselves. And I got the most out of it. Again,
it's a great book. We'll link to that in the show notes.
It's a great book, and it's about language. I can't do that. The growth mindset is, well, I can't do that yet. And that's such a small change in language that can really change your belief. I'm not the kind of person that likes to code. Well, maybe you're just not yet. So I guess as my top tip would be, my sub top tip is just remember that we're all growing every day, and just because you feel like you don't know something or you aren't comfortable in a certain area doesn't mean you can't learn and you can't get there.
Great advice. Maintaining a growth mindset, remembering that we're all a work in progress, and that just because you don't know something now doesn't mean that you can't learn it. So, Alison, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. It's been a fantastic conversation and no doubt very useful for a lot of the actuaries listening today. Thanks, Alison.
Thanks, Julia.